Here are some of the strangest military weapons ever developed. Number 10. Quantum stealth. An invisibility cloak in real life? Maybe. Blending in with the environment completely makes sense, but how about staying completely invisible in plain sight? Since 2012, a Canadian company has been working with the US and Canadian militaries in developing an invisibility cloak. The material is known as quantum stealth. This cloak makes anything behind it sort of disappear. It works well enough that the military wants in on this action. How does it work? Well, it's quite complicated. Basically, it's tiny mirrors arranged in very specific ways. The lenses in this material are arranged so that they create blind spots, which is directly behind this material. Whatever is behind it can't be seen. But once you get further away from the material, you can be seen. This is how the background can be seen through the material and creates the illusion of invisibility. Hey, do us a quick favor and hit that thumbs up button. Number 9. Who Me Gun. For the Who Me Gun, the end goal was to strictly cause discomfort in a strangely hilarious way. Developed sometime during World War II, the Who Me Gun was made small enough to fit in a pocket. It contained a smelly sulfur-based solution that was supposed to be sprayed into the pockets of enemy soldiers. The intention here was to humiliate the enemies for being smelly around them, and that was supposed to negatively impact morale for the enemies. Yeah, the US abandoned this project just 2 weeks in for good reasons. Spraying the solution affected not only the target, but also the person spraying the troops. And with that, getting found out was pretty easy since all the enemy troops had to do was follow the smell. It was also rather useless to carry something that only sprayed a smelly substance. Anyone is going to put up with a bad smell when their lives are on the line. Then there's the whole thing of smelly smells not really affecting morale at all. Number 8. Pain Ray. The Pain Ray is exactly what it sounds like. Not all military weapons have to end a life. Some are just for ensuring a perceived enemy stays at a safe distance. So how does this thing work? The Pain Ray sends a beam of short wavelength rays at the target. Think of it as a microwave, except much more intense. The ray basically instantly heats up the skin. The rays cause a sharp pain that's effective in sending away aggressors without injury in less than 5 seconds. But of course, if someone actually can withstand the pain, it can cause serious burns. It was in development between 2002 and 2007 and ordered by the Department of Defense. It was first deployed in Afghanistan in 2010, but was later recalled without being used. Despite having 2 of these bad boys, the US has refrained from using them in armed conflicts around the world. In 2020, there were reports that some federal officials had considered their use to control protesters that had gathered outside the White House. Number 7. Guardian Exo. The Guardian Exo exoskeleton is basically an Iron Man suit in real life. So how exactly does Guardian Exo work? The exoskeleton is largely designed for lifting heavy objects. It basically allows someone to lift objects that humans just can't lift. It can allow someone to lift things that are too heavy for even 2 people. According to the manufacturer, the exoskeleton increases the wearer's strength by a factor of 20, so it makes it easy for someone to lift as much as 200 pounds without breaking a sweat. However, it really depends on the application, so there are different types of suits for different needs. And getting into it is pretty easy, as it takes just about 30 seconds supposedly. That's because it attaches at 3 places: the feet, the waist, and the shoulders. And this suit isn't limited to just military use. It can also be used in industrial settings as well. Think of how this would help out some people in an Amazon warehouse. Number 6. Iceberg aircraft carrier. Military weapons have been manufactured using metals for the longest time. In 1942, desperate times almost gave birth to a new material. German forces were hard on the British Isles and had completely cut off their food and military supplies. What was the solution? A plan was hatched to make an aircraft carrier that would take the war to the Germans in the mid-Atlantic gap that they were exploiting. Instead of metal, the new warship was to have something called picrate as the main material. This stuff was a mix of ice and wood pulp. With picrate, the aircraft carrier would have been largely resistant to German attacks. Although this wasn't ever something actually completely developed, it's still really interesting it ever was considered viable. This endeavor was called the Habakkuk project, and Winston Churchill approved it in 1943. But the flaws became apparent as soon as the construction began. Keeping the massive structure frozen would have required a complex cooling system, something that hadn't been factored in initially. That meant it would have cost at least twice the initial projection. Additionally, an insane amount of pulp would have had to be gobbled up in the project, thus affecting the pulp and paper industry at the time. Number 5. Corner shot pistol. The corner shot pistol totally makes sense, right? It allows that someone to not only look, but also shoot around corners without having to expose themselves. While it was developed in the early 2000s by the Israelis, the concept isn't new. The Germans during the Second World War had rifles made up of a periscope and a curved barrel extension known as the Krummlauf. The improvisation failed because it was impractical and because the barrel quickly wore out. The corner shot pistol is far more advanced and much more effective. This front end consists of a camera, laser, a flashlight, and a trigger, all linked to the other end. The camera transmits what's happening around the corner to a small screen on the operator side. What if you just want to shoot something right ahead? All it takes is the flip of a switch. Number 4. Gyrojet weapons. The unique gyrojet gun was developed in the 1960s, but their use didn't quite catch on. Instead of using bullets, gyrojet firearms use small rocket projectiles known as microjets. Unlike bullets that leave the barrel at maximum speed, the microjets are slow at first and they reach maximum speed at a distance of around 30 feet. Because of the low starting velocity, this meant these guns didn't need a super strong barrel, nor was there much recoil. So gyrojet firearms are very light compared to the average gun at the time. However, the advantages didn't outweigh the disadvantages. During testing, most versions of it were slow-loading, inaccurate, and failed to fire on several occasions. Today, they're no longer in production, but they're still owned by collectors. To fire off a single round can cost over $100. Number 3. Cujo, robotic dog. As you can tell from the name, Cujo is a dog. Well, a robotic dog. It's a 4-legged carrier designed to relieve soldiers of much of whatever they needed to carry. These robotic dogs could carry around 400 pounds of weight and operate in almost every combat condition imaginable. This robot, disguised as a dog, had been in development for 5 years, but it does have a few dog-like qualities. For starters, it can follow a soldier out in the field. It was programmed to detect obstacles in its path and find a different route around them. And in case it fell over, it could get back up on its own. And even if it somehow got flipped over, its general structure made it easy for a soldier to flip it back up. During its unveiling in Hawaii, Cujo showed off its capabilities to replenish soldier supplies, especially in terrain that proved difficult to reach with normal vehicles. Unfortunately for Cujo, it doesn't look like he'll be a military guy's best friend just yet. Reasons for non-adoption included loud noises from the carrier and difficulties in repairing it when it broke down. Number 2. Vomit beam. The vomit beam is exactly what it sounds like. A beam that would make you puke. It's actually more like a flashlight than an actual gun. But unlike the flashlight, it randomly emits different colored light beams that are very bright and appear in rapid succession. To our human brain, that's just too much to handle. The constant change of frequency causes pressure on the brain, and all that leads to temporary blindness, headaches, nausea, disorientation, and ultimately, vomiting. The purpose is to incapacitate someone without long-term injuries and make arresting someone that much easier. The first prototype was built back in 2007. By 2010, vomit guns were to be available to the police, National Guard, and Border Patrol. However, it's still not in use in the US. The Russians, on the other hand, seem to be all in on this thing. In 2019, they went a notch higher by getting a bigger and more advanced version called the 5P42 fill-in. The non-lethal weapon has pretty much the same effects as the vomit gun. The difference is that it's used on a much bigger scale. And besides the disorientation and puking effects it induces, the fill-in can also impair night vision technology, sensors, and anti-tank missile rangefinders. Number 1. Sticky grenade. The very first grenades as we know them today were developed in the early 20th century. Fast forward to World War II, and grenades got a slight modification, one that made them sticky. It's not exactly advanced, the surface was just made sticky. To deploy it, soldiers would pull the pin from a grenade to activate it. From that point, it was just a matter of attaching to enemy tanks and watching as they blew up. However, they didn't work the way they wanted to. A major flaw of these grenades was their failure to stick to tanks when they were dirty. But they would somehow stick to soldiers' uniforms really well. That's definitely not a scenario any soldier would want to be in. The grenades had to be abandoned, but not before 2.5 million of them were used worldwide. Here's what's next.